really this theory is really talking about the power of word of mouth. One of the most powerful things that can happen with any sort of product, right, is to generate a positive word of mouth. If you can get the opinion leaders on your side where they can convince the opinion followers to buy your stuff, you're going to have a successful campaign. But again, the challenge is trying to find these influencers. Who are these influencers that are going to sway people? So, for example, I'm not going to show you the whole thing either for this. Well, 2 minutes.
This week, we're taking a look at the top earning TikTok stars. At number 5 is Josh Richards, who made $1.5 million. The 18-year-old gained quick fame for his dance, singing, and lip-syncing videos on TikTok. Richards also co-founded his own talent management company, Talent X, and his own drink business, Annie Energy. The teen says he's now focused on, quote, creating companies or getting equity in companies. At number 4 is Lauren Gray, who made $2.6 million. Until this spring, Gray had the biggest fan base of any TikToker, leading her to land sponsored content deals with Skechers, Hyundai, and Burger King. Gray also snagged a deal with Revlon, creating content for the company's TikTok account and Revlon-sponsored posts for hers. At number 3 is Dixie D'Amelio, who made $2.9 million. As the older sister of Charli D'Amelio, who's number 2 on our list, Dixie finds her fame intertwined with her sisters. They appear in many of each other's videos on TikTok, where Dixie has more than 32 million followers. However, Dixie is striking out on her own with her music career. She released her first single, Be Happy, in June, which has accumulated more than 58 million streams.
Wow.
At number 2 is Charli D'Amelio, who made $4 million. After posting on TikTok for the first time in June 2019, D'Amelio had a series of dance videos go viral last summer and fall. Her notoriety grew quickly from there. She's been on Jimmy Fallon, chronicled her time at Paris Fashion Week for Prada on TikTok, and struck sponsorship deals with companies like EOS Cosmetics and appeared in a Super Bowl commercial for Sabra Hummus. At number 1 is Addison Rae Easterling, who made $5 million. A year ago, Easterling was just settling into life at Louisiana State University and making choreographed TikToks. By fall, she had hit 1 million fans and was posting sponsored content with Aeropostale. Since then, she's become the main global spokesperson for American Eagle and launched her own makeup line, Item Beauty, as a joint venture with Ipsy, a San Mateo, California beauty startup.
Is there any questions regarding this idea of the opinion leader, the influencer? So again, thinking about your case study, right? Was it successful because they were able to get some powerful influencers to generate a powerful word of mouth to get people to try your product or to buy your product? Some people can make a lot of money, Georgette, doing this. It's no question. It's a lot of competition, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it takes to be an influencer, but it's interesting. Oh yeah. They're making more than doctors, lawyers, you name it. They're making a whole lot of money. Hopefully they're saving their money, because the thing with influencers, I think, is that they're fads, right? So you don't know how long their fame is going to last. Well, I think you want it to be an attorney, Georgette. I think that I would say you can do both. You can go to law school and be a TikToker. All right, so Henry Jenkins' convergence theory. Now, this is very similar to what I just talked about, guys and ladies. Very, very similar. Yes, that's right. You can do both. And so, and by the way, you could always then legally protect your content as a lawyer. You don't have to hire a lawyer. So Henry Jenkins, who talks about the idea of convergence culture. And again, this is very similar to what I just talked about right now. Now, one of the things that Henry Jenkins talks about is this idea of media and how we interact with media changed essentially as soon as things became digital, right? It used to be that if you wanted to go, you really couldn't interact with content because it was in a physical form like a book, or it was on film, or was on television. But now, because things have become digitized, it's really changed the relationship between text and the audience or the reader. And so you have the ability now to interact and change text. Think about this. By the way, I love doing this sometimes when I have time, which is never almost. But some of you or some people are really creative just in terms of how they act out their favorite scene of a movie, right? They'll have their own friends playing different roles, and they'll create their own version of their favorite scene from a particular movie. And I always find that pretty entertaining. And sometimes I think to myself, oh, they're pretty good. They should actually really be like creating their own original content. This is pretty cool. So this is what I mean by interacting with the content. And so now, besides the internet taking off and changing our interaction with the content, he does acknowledge the fact that there's issues and problems with the internet. So for instance, we have this thing called a participation gap or a digital divide. The digital divide is essentially really talking about the fact that some of us, right, are blessed to have good internet connections. We can afford the internet. And then there's folks out there, and even some amongst you, maybe, I don't know, that have issues just getting a good internet. Or maybe you can't even afford your internet in some cases. Or maybe you don't even know how to essentially use the computer, right? You could be, in essence, a computer illiterate, and therefore it causes you not to want to engage with the computer, and your ability to participate in this, new technology diminishes greatly because of your inability to know how the computer even functions. Like my mom is afraid of a computer. I still don't understand, but anyways, well, she's older. So anyways, transparency problems is like, how do you know the things that you're reading are actually true, right? It's unclear. So some of you, for instance, will end up citing, for instance, housewives from Nebraska in your case studies or in your group projects. And I'll wonder myself, well, I know why you're doing it, but I also think to myself, well, like they probably could have found a better source in this housewife from Nebraska, or this person from Idaho, but you end up citing random people because you don't always do your homework in terms of like, should I really think of this person or this article as authority? And so sometimes it's hard to figure out. It's hard to know what's authentic and what's not. It's really challenging at times. And then, of course, this idea of corporate versus the grassroots. Sometimes they work in synchronicity. In other words, they work perfectly well. If you think about things like Paranormal Activity, right, where essentially the distributor asks the fans, yes, release your movie in this theater. It works very well sometimes, and sometimes they clash, right? If you think about piracy. So one of the big issues when the internet first started was the fact that a lot of us were just stealing stuff online because it was easily accessible. And that would be an example of clashing, right? You don't want to pay $20 for an album, so I'll just poach my favorite song for free. And so this is clashing. So one of the things that Henry Jenkins talks about is this idea that fan culture, and this is really now drilling down to his theory, is fan culture online is more active, more intense, more passionate than fandom outside of the internet. Some of you, I know, for instance, the other class, my Monday class pointed out that BTS fans are like crazy, especially online. I don't know if this is true, 'cause I don't look at social media for BTS, but this is what they told me, that they're crazy and highly active and super passionate. And so Henry Jenkins says that this is cool and this is good because it can help the producers of content in terms of the production. So in other words, the producer could ask the fans, right? So what do you think should be the storyline for the following season, for instance? They can ask the fans, what do you think would be the best way to promote our movie or our television program? Or using, or for distribution, in other words, asking the fans where they should place the movie in terms of theaters. That's what I mean by distribution. And so Jenkins believes this is really good, that we can harness the power of the fans online so we can make decisions in our production, promotion, and distribution. And also, he believes that it's important for producers of content to look at how fans are using their texts. This idea of textual poaching, like how do fans subvert or use text online? It should be kind of cool for producers to really examine that and think about how it's being poached, not just simply get mad and go, "Oh, I'm blocking it, cease and desist, don't use it, don't access it." He believes that's bad. And so this idea of simply looking at ratings or box office or sales is not a good measurement. You should be looking at how people use your products. And also, right, this idea of, again, this is more of a question, important to think about how much you want to include fans in storytelling. Sometimes it's a good idea, and again, sometimes it may not be. And again, it's important for producers to know that fans will often distribute and interpret content. In other words, right, one thing that fans will do is that they'll take something and forward it to their friends. Again, the idea of using influencers to generate a gigantic buzz online. LimeWire, yes, LimeWire. Didn't LimeWire get taken down? Some of the other classes mentioned fan cams. I'm sure most of you have heard of this fan cam thing. Nobody's heard of fan cam? Okay, so I'm just going to play a little clip of this because really the Blair Witch Project was really the first movie to really take advantage of this idea of social media marketing or viral marketing, this idea of being able to use social media to generate a gigantic buzz. Really, Blair Witch Project was really the first film that started this. And now obviously other movies have borrowed some ideas from the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, all right, I'll call back, whatever.
Getting phone calls like
About the kids.
Here we go.
So we just kind
you started getting phone calls like, "Oh, we hear you're in Sundance."
there was a lot of interest. There's a lot of people asking questions. So we just kind of put up this website with some facts about the kids, the disappearance and some photos, and kind of treated it like a real event, like a real disappearance. The website became very popular, and by the time we went to Sundance, we had a mailing list of like 10,000 members, which is pretty huge for back in the day.
So I think all that vibe kind of like fed really well into Sundance. So we kind of rolled into Sundance and there was already this buzz about the movie.
We were all so excited for our premiere at midnight, and we come around the corner from the Egyptian Theater and there's this long alley that's the waiting area, And that alley was completely full. It was hundreds and hundreds of people.
Our agents were telling us that all these people from all these companies were there. Pretty much everybody that had the ability to buy a film was at that screening. And the screening went really well.
Everybody was talking about the movie. Everybody was excited. People were kind of coming out, is this real? You know, some were angry, some were like completely, like their mouths were hanging open.
And then around 2 o'clock in the morning, we got a call, and the Artisan people wanted to talk to our lawyers and our representatives.
And they said, we want to buy the movie. You know, we want to buy it tonight.
And then it was confirmed. We sold, and next morning, everything changed. We were doing interviews. We were being shuttled around as the first sale of Sundance. And before we knew it, we were on magazines and articles being written up. We had a Variety reporter following us around the entire week. All kinds of crazy stuff just happened.
It was this just crazy whirlwind. And so we were still kind of involved with it at that time. That was before they realized that they would have had a much easier time marketing it if we were really dead. So they did the best they could to simulate that. It was basically the first viral marketing that ever happened.
Once Artisan bought us, they took the website down and they redesigned it and they put it up section by section. So they knew the power of that website, and I think the website was, you know, one of the most highly trafficked websites of that year.
This was sort of pretty close to the dawn of internet marketing for movies, and you got this film that's shot on video. So it looks like mine in your home videos. Nothing ever looked like that on a big screen before, ever. So you have all these elements coming into play. It kind of just exploded all over the world.
We platformed and opened at the Angelica.
So again, if you think about, oops, there's questions. Yes, it was a cultural reset. And so one of the people who ran the campaign, her name was Amaret Jones. So Amaret Jones, who I actually worked with at one point in time, I should have asked her about Blair Witch, but she actually was the person who marketed the Blair Witch Project. She's the one that, I'm not sure if she's the one that actually bought the movie, but she marketed the movie. And through Artisan. And so one thing that ended up happening that was, yes, a cultural reset was, I remember I was living in Texas when this movie came out, and but I used to live in Maryland. And so people started sending me emails with the link of the website saying, hey, is this really true? Does this really happen? Because I know you used to live in Maryland. Is this really true? And I was like, no, this is fake. There's no way. This is not even based on a true story. There's no way this happened. I would have remembered, because I used to live in Maryland, if 3 kids that were essentially my age would have disappeared in Western Maryland. I would have remembered. And that never happened. Can you imagine the buzz if that would have happened in the news? So, but that's how the buzz on social media began, was essentially that people were sending this link to one another, asking them, is this really true? Did this really happen? And so that was the age or the dawn or the cultural reset of the internet, and how the internet became an important role in marketing a particular film. And because of social media, this particular movie generated a gigantic buzz. And again, so that's Henry Jenkins. All right, reinforcement and phenomenistic theory. And so by Thomas Clapper. And so one of the things that Clapper discusses is that when we watch media, we want to avoid cognitive dissonance, right? So in other words, going back to my friend who's highly political, who I know is Republican, and who watches, at least gets lots of conservative, does a lot of research on the conservative websites and things like that. It's not likely that that person is going to watch CNN or MSNBC, because it's watching those things are going to contest his beliefs, right? Especially if they're right about something. And so, and if he starts feeling like uneasy about potentially some information being true that goes against his ideology or his inner core of beliefs, he may start feeling this idea of cognitive dissonance. It's like, oh no, right? And then once you start experiencing cognitive dissonance, you may start rationalizing, right, your behavior. And so anyways, what Clapper says is that we want to avoid that feeling. And so we only watch things that where we don't feel this. So in other words, if you're a Democrat, you're going to watch MSNBC or CNN. If you're a Republican, you're going to watch Fox, and your social media, whatever you read on social media, is going to reflect your political ideologies for the most part, because you want to avoid cognitive dissonance. Make sense? And so therefore, right, you're going to practice these three things: selective exposure, right, because you're only going to watch things that fit your belief, number one. And so, in other words, did your product work? Because, it didn't make anybody feel uncomfortable. There was no cognitive dissonance. There is selective retention. In other words, you're only going to remember things that fit your ideology. So if you're watching Fox, and say you're a Republican, and they're being critical of the Republican Party, you're not going to remember that part. You're only going to remember the parts where they say nice things about the Republican Party, depending on how hardcore you are. Same with Democrats, mind you. And then there's selective perception, right? Perceived through a personal lens. What you let in and what you don't let in. We can control this, right? And our selective perception is influenced by our friends, our family, our church, all sorts of things. Our social circle affects our selective perception. So one of the things that Clapper says, right, is the media just maintains our status quo. In other words, right, if you like that brand, let's say it's Nike or Apple or that movie, right, or that star or whatever, it just maintains the status quo. It's just reinforcing what you already believed. So it doesn't really change anything per se, unless the media is introducing something brand new into our society. But for the most part, it's just the status quo. It's just the status quo. In other words, a commercial isn't necessarily going to change your opinion about a particular product. So for example,
Come on, guys!
Ooh-wee. Take it to the house, kid.
Where's he going?
Take it to the house, kid!
Take it to the house, kid!
Big boys always trying to show off. Let them get their little shot.
Hey, guys!
Take it to the house, kid.
Hey, take it to the house, kid! Take those to the car.
Give him a tip, will you, Joe?
Yeah, give him a tip, all right.
Hey, Kristen!
Take it to the house!
Hey, Nigel! Sorry, Julian. Nice kick, Harley! What up, Gary?
all right, so this is a really cute commercial. It's a good commercial, actually. So this is obviously, it's an NFL commercial promoting the fact that the NFL has been around for 100 years and hopefully for another 100 years afterwards. And really, right, whatever your feelings are about football, this commercial doesn't change it, right? If you love football or love the NFL, then this commercial is just reinforcing the fact that, you think the NFL is great, you think it's the best sport on planet Earth, or at least one of the better sports on planet Earth, those sorts of things. Doesn't change your opinion about the league at all. Now, of course, if you don't like the NFL, maybe your boyfriend or girlfriend watches too many games. Maybe you don't like the fact that, it's really rough and physical game, and people's bodies end up be broken afterwards. They're never really quite the same in many cases, and you don't like that. And so that'd be, by the way, a fair criticism. And so that's not going to change your opinion just because you watch this ad and go, oh, you think it's cute, but it doesn't change your opinion about the league, right? Or about the sport. Again, it just goes, oh, well, just, you might look at this and say, well, this is just a bunch of propaganda. It's cute, but it's propaganda. I'm not buying it. Interesting. That's weird. That is weird. So is that clear that really media doesn't change your opinion about anything? Your opinion before the ad is really not changing. If you didn't like it before, the advertisement doesn't change it. If you liked it before, then you're going to keep liking it. Unless the product is absolutely brand new and you have no knowledge of it, then maybe it might change your opinion one way or the other. Very good, Gabrielle. Yes, give it a menorah. Yes, well done. All right, and this is the last theory I'm going to talk about today because I think I'm running out of time. Doesn't tell you what to think, just what to think about. Oh, there you go. Interesting. Yes, that is a quote. McLuhan. All right, so uses and gratifications, and I'm going to post maybe one or two more theories up, so just in case that might be useful for some of you that we're not going to get to. So uses and gratifications, this idea that media users use media and media text to satisfy certain psychological needs, right? If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so like there's safety and security, there's this idea of love and acceptance and this hierarchy, right? And so media essentially, according to uses and gratifications, fulfills one of those needs within the hierarchy. And this theory assumes that we're not passive. We're making some active choices in interpreting and integrating certain types of media into our lives. So again, we're not this passive couch potato. So if we don't like something, we're going to change it. And if it's not meeting our needs, we're going to change it. And so one of the things that this is important about uses and gratifications is that, yes, media is active, but it's also goal-oriented. In other words, we use media for certain purposes. So for instance, maybe your circle of friends really loves watching the NFL, for instance. Maybe your circle of friends really likes watching a certain program. And so to connect with them, you too will watch it because that's the goal. You may watch media because it's the funniest thing out there, at least in your opinion. It may provide an escape for you, right? So even though some people say escapism is bad, sometimes I think escapism is really good, especially if you're kind of getting stressed out. Then an escape might be okay. And so this particular media, it enables you to escape your reality for a little while. Maybe your purpose is educational, right? Maybe you're going to learn something from watching this particular type of media. And this, in your opinion, is the best educational tool out there, at least when it comes to movies or documentaries or whatever. Or maybe it's relatable, right? Of everything that you know, the characters are most relatable. So therefore you watch it. So whether it's some sort of reality television, like let's say, I don't know, The Bachelor or Bachelorette, you find the characters on there relatable. So therefore that's the reason why you watch it. And of course there might be multiple factors, right? Your friends or family or friends, well, friends or family, or maybe your classmates also watch it. So this idea of connecting with others might be part of the relatable. And so the audience links pleasure with media. So this idea that you get pleasure from watching this particular type of media, like for instance, this idea that you watch mystery programs because you want to try to figure out who did it. current media, other sources like people can be companions or compete for pleasure. So in other words, if you're a huge fan of the NFL, right, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, can be your companion in watching the games. Or they may be non-fans and hate this and might be competing with the television for your attention. Now, again, the person can change. You're active. Last couple points is audience assists with media research. In other words, the audience tells you why they're watching a specific thing, but you have to be, again, self-aware. And value judgments. So, in other words, you're the only one that's valuing the content. Other people shouldn't value you or value the content and basically tell you you're wrong for watching that. In other words, shame you. In other words, right? Let's just say you like The Bachelor or Bachelorette. Your other friends or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whoever shouldn't shame you because you like watching that show. You're the one that gets pleasure from it. And so you're the only one that really should be valuing it, not the people who are criticizing you for watching it. So I know I went a little bit over. Sorry. Any questions about uses and gratifications? Any last questions regarding the group project? Good question, Jesse. Well, I mean, depends on the number of people that are in your group, but the best groups honestly don't talk very long, maybe 3 to 5 minutes max. And again, if you have 5 people in your group, the max should be 4 minutes. If you have 4 people in your group, the max should be probably 5 minutes. But really, the best presentations are usually about 15 minutes long, honestly. There's no minimum or maximum for paper length. Generally speaking, the best papers are between 25 to 35 pages is usually about the best. Those are usually the best papers. But I've also had a paper that was 50 pages long that was amazing. Yep, I had a group that wrote 50 pages, yeah. They did Black Panther. It was 5 people in a group, so 50 pages, 10 pages apiece. Not that big of a stretch, actually. Well, and of course you're doing Black Panther, right? Which means it's a Marvel movie, as well as Disney, and so Disney and Marvel movies get lots of press and lots of coverage. So think about the number of articles that they could actually look at. So it's easy actually to write 50 pages if you have that much information at your disposal. No questions? So if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. I'm going to be like a crazy person this weekend, but I will get back to your email. Tordov narrative theory. This will be the last theory I talk about that might be useful for some of you in terms of your case study. And so for this particular theorist, right, this idea of narrative structure. So most movies that we watch, right, if you think about traditional, typical Hollywood cinema, even in some cases, even non-traditional independents, they always have a beginning, middle, and an end, right? And so if you think about the three parts, the beginning is obviously the introduction. Usually it's about, at least in modern cinema, it's usually about 10 to 15 minutes. Then we have the second act or the middle part where something goes wrong and the protagonist is trying to fix it. And then the last part, the resolution, which is usually, 10 or 15 minutes. Usually the third act is pretty short. And so if you think about this narrative theory, right, he basically talks about the fact that in a narrative, we typically have 5 parts. And so we have equilibrium, which is normal. So if you think about almost every single movie that you've watched, in this American film, if we start with normal, what is normal? What is their everyday life like? And you see them living their normal life, whether it's living in a middle-class environment with a nice home, but you see they're normal. With their group of friends, normal. Number 2, we have a disruption. This is typically where the plot twist occurs and normal is no longer quite normal. Normal has become unbalanced or unique. And so now they're normal, or their world has been sort of turned upside down. So for instance, that plot twist could be like a parent dying, right? Or a sibling dying, or getting their heart broken by their boyfriend or girlfriend, some sort of plot twist. Recognition, right? The recognition is where the protagonist acknowledges the problem. So after the plot twist, for a period of time, the protagonist doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that, their life has been altered, or at least they're in denial. Recognition is recognizing that, okay, we do have a problem that certainly needs to be solved, but the protagonist first and foremost needs to acknowledge this is actually a problem that they need to address. Which leads to the fourth part, which is where the protagonist tries to fix the problem. Now, mind you, disruption, recognition, and repair all happen in the middle part of the narrative. And then the last part is where the problem is either fixed or not fixed. And then we have a new normal. So whether or not the problem gets fixed at the end or doesn't get fixed at the end, the protagonist is now living in a new normal. Their new life moving forward is going to be different than it was at the beginning of the movie. And so what Tordov basically talks about when he talks about the producer's ideology, right? Think about how some narratives celebrate certain things. And so it may reflect a producer's ideology. For instance, why do we always celebrate, let's say, democracy in our movies, or celebrate capitalism? Or why do we demonize certain groups of people in our narratives, right? It may reflect the producer's ideology, their set of beliefs. Why do we have certain countries as the enemy, for instance? And so these things that might be embedded in the story, right, may tell us who is, or what is the ideology of that particular individual that is creating the story. Probably one of my favorite theorists is cultural hegemony, is Antonio Gramsci. So he's a Marxist theorist and a critical theorist, I should say, really more than he's both Marxist and critical. So basically, when Antonio Gramsci was sitting in a political prison because he was Italian under the regime of Mussolini, while he was in prison, he used to think to himself, well, how is it that a small group of folks can control the masses, right? How is it possible that just a handful of people can establish and maintain control of the masses? Because really, if they really wanted to, right, the masses could just uprise and easily overthrow the elites if they wanted to. There's no way that the handful of elites could stand up to the masses if the masses revolted. And so basically what Gramsci determined, he came up with, was that the reason that a small handful of folks can control the masses is through hegemony. And so basically, if you think about Marx's superstructure, Gramsci breaks it down, splits up the superstructure into two parts. One is the political society, which is made up of the police and the military. Now, the police and the military, one of the reasons why the elites are able to maintain control of us, according to Gramsci, is that if the masses do start to uprise, that the elites could always sick the police and the military on us. In other words, they can use their military might, their guns, their weapons to suppress us. And so we won't focus on the political society because I want to focus on the civil society because that's where media lies. So the other part is the civil society. This is the part where the elites don't use the police or the military to suppress the masses. They use messages, right? They use things like education. They use things like messages in the media to essentially get us all to agree to a certain ideology, but in a very subtle way, right? They're not hitting us over the head with it, with the military or the police. It's very subtle, and it's done with messaging. And so if you think about it, right, think about how rarely in our media or in our entertainment do we see things like poverty, right? We very rarely see the ills of society in our pop culture. And there's a reason for that, at least according to Gramsci. It's to protect the status quo. It's to protect things like the idea of meritocracy. So think about, for instance, how often we are told in our media, in our pop culture, that we earn our place in the world through hard work only, right? It's not about luck, right? It's not about nepotism or sexism or any of those things, right? You can overcome all those things through simply hard work. And so I'm going to show you a clip. By the way, I love this movie. I love it. But it's a perfect case of hegemony.
I thought I'd wear a shirt today, being the last day and all.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. But wear one tomorrow, though, okay? Because tomorrow's going to be your first day. If you'd like to work here as a broker. Would you like that, Chris?
Yes, sir.
Good. We couldn't be happier. So, welcome. Was it as easy as it looked?
No, sir. No, sir, it wasn't.
Good luck, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, sir.
Oh, Chris. I almost forgot.
Thank you.
this part of my life, this little part, is called happiness.
Okay, again, I love this movie. Even though I've seen it, I don't know how many times. I love it. I love it, love it, love it, love it. But it's also, right, if you watch the ending part, it's pure hegemony, right? It's this idea that, we see this a lot in our pop culture, of this idea of a nobody becomes somebody, right? This idea that if you work hard enough, you can achieve, whatever goal that you're trying to achieve, and if you just work hard enough. And so, what Gramsci's trying to tell you here with this idea of hegemony and this idea of protecting concepts like meritocracy is that you can do everything right and still things may not work out for you. I mean, you could work long hours and stay up and try to pursue your goals, and it still may not work out for you. And so, but what Gramsci says is like, well, when that does happen, you don't blame the system, you blame the person, because even though that person may have worked 14 hours or 15 hours to try to achieve that goal, right? Because they failed, that's still their fault. It's not the system's fault. It's your fault because you didn't work hard enough. And so if you think about it, right, our American stories, our movies, our television programs are full of these sorts of messages, of this idea that, right, you can go from a nobody to a somebody if you work hard enough, right? Because there's this thing called meritocracy, which, by the way, is not 100% false, because if you remember, Pursuit of Happiness is about Christopher Gardner, and Christopher Gardner is based on a true story. Christopher Gardner was essentially this homeless salesperson who, through hard work, does become, this multimillionaire. And that's what makes hegemony so powerful, is because there are grains of truth in it, which makes it immensely powerful. So this idea of cultural hegemony, right? It's a theory that the elite's ideology becomes also the society status quo, or their ideology, right? This idea that if we all buy into this idea of like, if we ever see a homeless person sitting on the corner, it's like, it's not that person's fault. I mean, it's that person's fault that person's homeless. That person just didn't work hard enough, right? It's never the system's fault that person's homeless. It's the individual's fault. And so if you think that way, by the way, you are thinking like the elites, because the elites want you to believe if the system is failing, you don't want to blame the system, you want to blame the person. That's capitalism. And so counter hegemony, right, means that it goes against the ideology, this idea of upheaval. One of the reasons why Gramsci talks about this idea that the elites remain in power is because when there's counter hegemony, right, what ends up happening is that the elites end up shifting their ideology. So, for example, let me give you a pop culture example. When rap first came out, and when rap was first becoming popular, and when rap was criticizing society, right, about all the social ills of our society, those are examples of counter hegemony. What ends up happening to rap over time, right? It ends up getting bought by the elites, right? The powers that be start buying or producing these records. And so therefore now rap, as opposed to being counter hegemony at one point in time, is now part of the hegemony. And so again, one of the reasons why the elites remain in power, going back to the idea of hegemony, is that culture or the elite's ideology never remains static. It's always shifting. And it's important to shift, because if you don't shift and become too rigid, it collapses. And so the elites are able to remain in control because their ideology shifts, right? And so that's how they remain in control. So in other words, did your product become popular because it was sending out some sort of hegemonic message that resonated with the masses? This idea that a nobody can be somebody, the underdog wins, right? That sort of thing.